We are back and ready to kick off our first round of the day. It's going to be round 6 of the Swiss overall, but the first one of the day, and it is going to be Eddie versus Tomoff kicking off the day for us here, Lorinda. And both these players bringing some pretty cool lineups. I think quite good lineups, honestly, especially now that we've had the luxury of a whole day's worth of play to judge everyone's lineups and see what's actually doing well. But the big thing that sticks out for me here is the Demon Hunter list from both players. And not only is Eddie bringing, I think, a deck that's, I think people just line up for him, as he's one of the players who's known the most to actually play this, is this Control Demon Hunter list with the Magtheridon, the Chaos Nova, the Cobalt Spellkin before it was cool, and also these Aldrachi Warblades, sorry, of course. But also, even Tomov's list is a little bit different, with him rocking a double boom pistol bully in there, along with the Mayev Shadow Song as well. So even though this looks like a bit more of a standard tempo list, there are some tech cards in here for Tomoff too.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. I have a bad or a good habit, depending which way you look at it, of naming decks after players. So Eddie Demon Hunter is Control Demon Hunter to me. But you don't always necessarily see those players actually bring the deck themselves. So having the person who invented the deck bring the deck is always exciting to me, because you always get to see all the nuances, the reasons they put the cards in the deck. You get to see why it works out. And we're going to get to see Magtheridon actually work properly, maybe.
Right, and the big point here is with these, I'll call them specialist decks, for where, you know, these players, you feel like there's only certain players that can even pilot them. There's always, I've found, a very big difference between how a regular person thinks the deck should be played and how the pro or the creator of the deck actually plays it. And normally the person who made the deck is correct. So I'm excited to see Eddie pilot this one, although this might be quite a tough matchup, because the Control Demon Hunter has a lot of these anti-aggressive tools, but against Warlock, that's not really what you're after.
No, it's a bit too slow. Warlock is doing really well in this tournament, mainly because it was there to target the priests. That's the fundamental level 1 thinking behind bringing it. But it turns out that other slow decks exist, and this Demon Hunter is one of those other slow decks. It's not able to put in the aggro like you would want from a Demon Hunter. Right. It doesn't even have like unless you get the 12-12 down, it kind of just responding, and there's nothing to respond to if the Warlock's just healing all the time.
Right, and don't get me wrong, although this is a Control Demon Hunter, it does have access to a lot of damage, and that is most of the time in the form of the Warglaves of Azinoth that are still rocking 2 off in this list from Eddie, and also the Horde Pillager, which, yes, there's Aldrachi Warblades, but there might be, Eddie might even focus on, in this matchup, unless he really desperately needs the heal, he might even focus on not playing the Aldrachis until he's already played his Horde Pillager, working in a very similar vein to how Bomb Warriors don't necessarily always go for Ankar, depending on what their hand looks like, so they can focus on getting the Wrench Caliber reactivated with the Horde Pillager.
Yeah, it will also be interesting to see how he goes with the Scoundrels, 2 Volpera Scoundrels in the deck to generate more damage. Obviously, Metamorphosis being nerfed is a big deal in that regard. So it'll be interesting to see what he can pull from those as the game goes on, because this will take some time, in terms of number of turns at least. Right.
And there's certain cards already we see for Eddie. The Blade Dance not really going to get too much value in the foreseeable future, so he's going to be a little bit worried already that his hand's getting a little bit full and a little bit clunky. If he uses this Spectral Vision, he's going to draw a couple more cards, and then suddenly in his hand there's a Skull of Gul'dan, a Warglaves, a Blade Dance he can't really use, and this Cobalt Spellkin that's going to get him another 2 cards. So tons of value, but is value really what he wants at this moment in time?
Yeah, I think he wants to force at least some damage. Obviously, the first damage you deal gets healed, so there's no urgent hurry to do it. But also, we might see him dumping cards, like you're, I think, alluding to there, to make room for constructing the perfect hand. Whatever he may deem that to be.
Tomoff here with that Questing Explorer. Means that he can continue to accelerate this quest pretty dramatically. He will be spamming that live tap, because as you mentioned, it's not like this Demon Hunter deck from Eddie is going to pile on a ton of pressure early on. And also, he's really just looking for that plot twist, the card that really unlocks the quest for the Warlock here.
Yeah, and any card will do after you get plot twist done. You get the quest complete and just start tapping away. Just hope to not hit your 1-mana cards and you're good. But he's going to have to almost combo this down from 30. Eddie's going to have plenty of removal just lying around chilling by the end of the game, because he isn't going to be able to use it on anything, because the Warlock's not going to provide any threats. So Tomoff is going to have to balance his Alexstraszas, etc. pretty well at the end. And that's Eddie's timer, is the Alexstrasza into kill you next turn.
Yeah, it's a very strange matchup because it's not close to a mirror, but both players have access to such high levels of burst healing, because even the Demon Hunter from Eddie here, running Moarg Artificer along with, say, an I-Beam, can heal for a lot, along with those Aldraki Warblades and, say, some Twin Slices. Yeah, I can see the Twin Slice come out now to help take down this minion, but also just have some minions on the board to pound some pressure. But there, Lorinda, is a plot twist.
Yeah, and that's a massive deal. It's going to help Tomoff just almost complete what he's trying to do straight away. What Eddie was trying to do was get enough board presence to force some cards out of Tomoff's hand. Not because the board presence was going to do any damage, but because it would make the plot twist worse if Tomoff drew it later. But now it's been drawn, that's like a big deal for Tomoff in this matchup.
Yeah, and I think this Dark Skies now looks pretty reasonable. It's not the most powerful Dark Skies you've ever seen, but most importantly, against Demon Hunter, you don't really have a ton of great targets with this control version to actually try and kill, because they don't really play a ton of threatening minions. And most importantly, his quest is actually going to be active just straight off the top here on the natural draw.
Yeah, and just to point out, I think you clarified this yesterday, I just want to check. The upside down cards are Brood Mothers, right?
Yes, yeah, we did see it is a bit of a strange bug at the moment with the Spectator client, so we do apologize, but those two cards are the Aranasi Broodmothers, 2/4/6 taunts that heal. We did see them as well, give him that +8 health total by drawing 2 of them, so yeah, we know for sure they're the Aranasis.
It would actually be fun, given that your opponent sees them when they're revealed, if they just were upside down in your hand the whole game.
Yeah.
And your opponent sees them, but they don't, as to our knowledge at least, but that would be funny to me. It's not like it's a surprise. So Eddie looking for something to dump here, basically.
Well,
and that's easier said than done. He's got to make a plan with it.
Yes and no, right? He could go for the Magtheridon and have the Nova for later on to activate it. Wouldn't be the worst play I've ever seen, but with that coin, not only does this get this Wargraves live, it also puts the skull in a playable position in his hand. He doesn't have to do it next turn, but it's just always going to be there now for whenever he needs it.
Yeah, he's all set up to get maximum damage in one turn with the slices in hand, with the weapon equipped, and now he can go about his business probably setting up Magtheridon.
Yeah, and in case you don't know what Magtheridon does, it is not a card that is seen too commonly, but it's basically dormant, and it summons 3 1/3s for your opponent. And if they all die, he then awakens and destroys everything else on board, and is a 12/12. So pretty powerful effect, but it does require a little bit of trickery to get that done, because there are some classes that can completely ruin Magtheridon. So if you don't clear it in the same turn and activate it, they can, for example, polymorph, bounce one of the 1/3s, basically alter them so you can't kill 3 of them, which is what is required to activate the Magtheridon's Battleground.
Yep, the key being they have to die. So if you do any of those things, if you evolve them into something else, etc., and the more you think about it, the more things you find that actually mess with it, the worse it becomes. But it does turn out that if you play it and kill the things in the same turn, doesn't matter. Your opponent can't interact with them. You get a 12/12.
Demons.
That being said, if your opponent hasn't had to kill much else, 12/12s are fun and all that, but they don't necessarily last that long.
A simple spell should do.
Well, as we can see right now, a 12/12 would be a real nuisance for Tomoff.
Yeah, it would.
As it
He knows
happens.
there's the two taunts there. I think really what Eddie might be waiting for here is if Tomoff plays actual minions on the board and creates any form of threat, at any of that point he can just go Magtheridon, Chaos Nova, let's go next. and then forget about it. So I think this Magtheridon might be less of an aggressive tool and more of a defensive clear, which ends up in a threat.
Yeah. Tomoff also is actually going to have a little bit of an issue here. It's not really the issue it seems to have, all your 9 drops in your hand, but it's also not fun. He would rather plot twist this away and try again, because this can just get a little bit clunky.
Right.
Usually fixes itself. If you just get 1 damage spell that costs 0 plus a Soulfire, you tend to be okay. And Eddie is nearly down to the magical 18, where things become much easier for the Warlock to just finish you off thanks to the way that 9s work. Malygos Soulfire being 9.
And turns almost exactly like this are why I'm very excited and interested to just watch Eddie play, because I just honestly, Lorinda, just don't really know what he should do, right? So I'm happy to sit here and learn. What we can try and do is explain the outcomes of what he does do, but in terms of suggestions, he does have a few options. Get that Magtheridon down now, but that does leave the 1-3 up with some potential shenanigans, or just go for this full parent. But I don't know if you agree, Lorinda, but it looks like he might just be trying to keep this fairly simple.
Yeah, surprised he's going for the mana burn this turn instead of next turn, so that to me suggests he's going to try and set something up. Yeah, and he is going to try and go for the Magtheridon now, because otherwise he would mana burn going into the 9 mana turn, because that's the turn where Tomoff starts actually fighting back.
Right, and although you see didn't get too much value from the Magtheridon actually wiping the board as his battle cry, which I feel like a lot of people forget that's what it does, is it clears the board, but mainly just putting a 12-12 down as a threat is pretty huge.
And these pickups actually were pretty huge as well for Tomoff. Just gave him extra chances to not get exploded, because there's no cane available for Eddie in his control variant, so annoying taunts are annoying taunts.
Right.
He managed to clear up anyway.
Poor Warlock.
For just a second, I was looking at Zephyrus with just Shadow of Death, because that would have kept the breath available in hand for Tomoff to maybe be a bit more aggressive with it. But on the other side of that, well, Zephyrus can be very aggressive too, so it's not really a massive loss, right? It's just for a second there I was looking at Shadow of Death.
You always forget that Zephyrus in his deck is sort of available so early on.
Right.
The way it works, and I don't think it's by design, it's just a thing that happens, is you clear up all your 2-ofs before you plot twist. Or a lot of them. Just the way that they are the cards you tend to play early.
And we even see now, as I alluded to earlier, that sometimes, although Eddie would have loved to go Warglaives and push even more damage, because he was brought down to 19, I think the Aldraki Warblades is just a requirement from Eddie now to try and get some level of heal. But there's the Alexstrasza, dropping him down to 15, and now the ask is going to be there. Can he do anything to heal up here and even deal with this Alexstrasza?
Yeah.
Was that a yes, which means a no?
That's a yes that means he can, but it's not fun, right? He's got the Chaos Nova and the Slicers, so he can technically deal with it, but he can't really get out of range of high numbers. So if he stays above 9, it'll be a success story at this point.
He can actually go Moag Chaos Nova this turn, which would clear the Alexstrasza, and he could still hero power to push some more damage to face and also heal for 3. I think he might be forced into that, you know.
I wonder if he'll use... There is a Slice on there, right? I wonder if he'll use Slice to heal to 19. It's such a big difference.
Yeah, that's fine.
Getting out of range of double Soulfire.
Although, of course, you generally like the slices to be used to end the game because there is heal on both player sides, I feel like just getting the damage in now and most importantly getting to 20 is going to be pretty huge here for Eddie.
Yep. He agrees, and Tomoff, pretty good rolls there from the nerfed Dragon Queen. Metamorphosis.
Speaking of nerfs, though, there's the Metamorphosis, and with Consume Magic, he can silence the 4/9 and just try and dump a lot of damage into face here. He can push what? 7 this turn? The problem is it leaves up 12 on Tomoff's side, and that often just leads to death. So this is a little bit tricky, and I think Eddie has to go fishing for something pretty incredible. And I honestly, outside of a Moag and, say, an I-Beam, I don't really think the answer actually exists to the level of threat on this board.
He might be able to get to the range where his Zeph becomes active. Depending on what he draws, it didn't, but we haven't got deck trackers, so I don't know how many 2-ofs he had, but that Chaos Strike could have activated the Zephyrs, I believe, in some situations.
Oh, I do think we have a spectator bug, as multiple cards have been played now. We'll see what's happening. It looks like Eddie is going face, and we'll a bit of an unfortunate time for the spectator bug to kick in here. Yep, we did see an 8 damage swing.
It looks like he's just setting up the lethal for, if you haven't got it, I have. And unfortunately, we're just going to cut away there where we sort that bug out at the key moment. But it looks like Tomoff's going to win this.
Yeah, leaving it all for a mystery there, but it did look pretty good for Tomoff overall. We'll just have to see how that one shakes out as we just get the spectator reset for you guys. So we do apologize about that. We'll get the results, or even if the game's continuing, we'll get back to it as quickly as we can. There we go. Okay, so yeah, it looked like Eddie just pushed as much damage as possible. Tomoff
and he did manage to heal.
Yeah, Tomoff gets to just play this Deathwing, though, and have the Kartuk defender there.
But he's going to be close to dead. Because their Zephyrs might be active. It wasn't last turn, I don't believe. But Tomoff's own Zephyrs is active, getting him a healing touch.
Wow. That's so huge, because we could see the Consume Magic as well. It would have been pretty big to just destroy or remove the effect of the Kartuk. But now with that healing touch, again, both players just about hanging on. But can Eddie really do this again, Lorinda? Because this Deathwing looks far too scary for me.
Yeah, I think he's out of options for healing, so can he do enough damage? Doesn't look that way. Yeah, Volpira is the please give me something nice, but I don't even know what something nice would be in this situation. Can he win with a silence, maybe?
I mean, he already has a Consume Magic, right?
So he does. And his Zephyr's still not active with 5 cards left.
Yeah, that is extremely unfortunate, I think, there for Eddie.
Like, if you're going to win an unfavoured matchup, which I assume this is, though I'm not going to go too deep on that one, you really need your not to have unlucky Zephyrs and so on.
Right, because look how different the game would look like if this Deathwing just went away because of Zephyrus, right? Eddie can still push damage, he starts Metamorphosis, and he wouldn't be taking 12, and most importantly, he wouldn't just be dead this turn, because Malygos into Rain of Fire is going to end this game. Tomoff is going to take game number 1 over Eddie. The Warlock beats down this Control Demon Hunter, but I will say that was a very interesting game to watch, and quite the close one, as you mentioned. If that Zephyrus was active a little bit sooner for Eddie, or if at all, maybe that game does look very, very different. He put out a lot of damage earlier on, and maybe, you know, a Fireball, Lava Burst, Wind Fury could have been enough damage for Eddie to just steal the game there.
And it's a big, big deal as well, because both players have the Hunter available to them, and Hunters quite like just smashing away into Warlocks. So if that Warlock had still been up the way that Conquest works, Eddie could have got a Hunter into that later on. Maybe that's almost a 2-game swing in some ways there. So making it very difficult now for Eddie to get this one done, I think.
Yep, and we're checking out Tomoff's Demon Hunter now. And as I mentioned, a bit more of a regular list is the tempo variety, but it does have those two Boom Pistol Bullies in. I was distracted because there's 2 Maiev images, but there's the 2 Boom Pistol Bullies in the list, which is going to help really just shore up some of the awkwardness of one not having access to Gladebound. Sorry, not Gladebound. I'm just naming too many cards now because I'm looking at them. Of Warglaves, but also just these 2 Boom Pistol Bullies are just going to help fill out that 5-slot gap that the Warglaves have left.
Yeah, and I want to see that in action, actually. I think, especially in this lineup today where Rogue is doing really well, which isn't an impact on this particular match. But the bullies against Rogue can just shut Rogue down for that one turn while you finish them off. I think I suspect that's how Tomoff has got to this position, by being somebody who is beating that 55% Rogue win rate.
Yeah, and we'll see what he's going to go, if Eddie's going to queue his Demon Hunter again or not, and potentially play not a mirror match. Okay, looks like Eddie is going to be on this Hunter instead, and the Highlander Hunter versus the Tempo Demon Hunter is a matchup that I played a lot of, and I think it's still just very, very close. Even with these nerfs on Demon Hunter, I still think it is a very, very threatening class.
Yeah, before the nerfs, this was my favourite matchup from the Demon Hunter side. I'm sure you played it a lot from the Hunter side. Just my favourite matchup altogether. And after the nerfs, I don't think they're going to make enough difference for Hunter to become favoured. I think that a lot of the damage was done in the early game.
Right. But this is a great potential start of an opening hand here for Eddie. Just Dwarven Sharpshooter alone is such a nightmare for Demon Hunter to deal with. And then even just Desert Spear as well. Eddie could potentially get away with keeping this Scavenger's Ingenuity. He's going to throw it, but if he had kept it, I wouldn't have been overly upset.
And one of the newer caster memes to say, unfortunately, is just Demon Hunter minions all have 2 health. It's not quite as true as it was, but yeah, Sharpshooter shoots for 2, Desert Spear does 2 damage with the Locust and the Spear. Having 2 health is a big downside when your opponent's drawn those cards. But as I said, it's not quite the same meme as it was originally. Now people playing Berserkers and such like.
Yep, and a Twin Slice and a Hero Power have been used up here by Tomoff to clear off the Sharpshooter, but Eddie does still have an answer with this Coin into Spear, which I think is 100% the right play, as this allows him to not only take this Battle Fiend off the board, but also set up for future turns where the Spear is going to be very, very powerful versus the Demon Hunter's early game.
Yeah, Battle Fiend, since it became a 1/1, it's a weird card, because if you just watch Hearthstone, you'll never see it do more than about 2 damage. But that's not the point. The point is your opponent has to do weird things like coin out Desert Spears to deal with it. Absolutely right to do so, and especially with the hand he has. But even without this hand, I think he would have done it anyway. But you can just the card forces your opponent to do things they might not want to do, which is always good, even if the card then dies.
I wouldn't even mind a Soul Cleave here from Tomoff. I think you're generally getting decent value from that, and the heal might help out in the matchup. Chaos Strike, maybe the more, I'll say, safe pick, as just the more consistent card. 2 mana, draw a card, and deal some damage is pretty powerful. So don't blame Tomoff for going for this one. Just wants a bit more of a straightforward plan, I feel like.
Yeah, it does a lot of things, Chaos Strike, in this particular matchup as well. Your 2 dangers playing against Highlander Hunter are running out of cards and running out of damage, because the Hunter does slowly gain control, and when it's gained control, it kills you really fast with those high-end expensive spells. And so Chaos Strike actually just punching you for 2 and then drawing another card which will do more damage, surprisingly good when you get to about turn 6 or so.
Just the Shadow Weaver onto Shadow Weaver here, coming down just to slow this down just a little bit for Tomoff, and keeping ahead on the board just about. This Bone Wraith is going to be pretty good at just stalling some damage here, and although it is only 2 attack, which looks a bit weak versus Tomoff's board, he does have that Desert Spear to make up the numbers here.
Yeah, and this Bone Wraith is just a real nuisance. It's just the last thing you want to see early on as a Demon Hunter. Is like, just want to get on with hitting them in the face. You don't want to be messing around with these stupid taunt minions that slow you down and cheat and ugh. As you may guess, Raven, we're on opposite sides of this one as to what we normally play. The Bully's going to come in handy. It's just going to be a much needed source of damage for getting the ability.
Yeah, just a 5/5 really, isn't it? There are, there were some cards versus, when you're playing it against Hunter, that it does lock out. But generally, at this stage in the game, Hunter has something to do. on any given turn that doesn't require a battle cry. So not really backbreaking like it is versus some other classes and some other decks right now. But as you quite rightly said, and one of the reasons why I think this is the card in the deck is it has some great upside with its battle cry, but it's also just a actual playable minion on 5, because Gladebound Adept isn't really playable on 5 anymore, and neither is Warglaves of Azinov, so there needs to be something that fills out that 5 slot.
I do wonder, though, in this matchup, if he just saves it one turn to try and lock out a Rot Nest. And with that pickup of Maeve has made that decision a lot more easy for him. You might have heard me take the intake of breath, because Maeve's not a card we see much. And it's turned up in a few decks this weekend. A lot of people thought it was just going to be a great card, and it turned out that is just not the case. But with the nerfs and with the new build and with the aggression that is now shown, it's just nice to be able to lock out your opponent like this.
Right. Speaking of which...
Rotness Drake turns up.
Yeah, and this is where it starts to get a little bit tricky here for Tomoff, as Eddie... It's not like this Bone Wraith is gone forever. It's going to be back next turn. It's going to prove a bit of a problem. And I think because of that, Tomoff might have to just bite the bullet here and actually kill this Rot Nest while he can. Because if he can't next turn, because of the Bone Wraith, he's just going to be dead.
Yeah, and this is where, when we say that Maeve might not be as good a card as you thought it could be, look at what it actually did there. Very, very little. Looked great, looked like it was going to get it done, I must admit. But trading and playing Maeve was weird to me. I felt if you're going to play the Maeve, you go face and get on with it, yeah. And then worry about it in the next turn when that comes up.
Well, on the other side here, with the help of Huffer, Eddie's going to be able to push a lot of damage. And this Explorer with these Discovers, I'm not really sure which one I like the most here. As it does look like we have a slight spectator bug once again. We can still just view Eddie's hand, so maybe we could have cast from that. But there's a few tough choices there, because although Varanus looks good most of the time in that situation, the only minion that really benefits from Varanus through stat-wise would have been the Explorer, which has poison anyway, so it doesn't need the enemy minions to be one health. So it's a very, very strange pick there, but I do think maybe just overall, Varanus is the best pick out of those choices. We are back in the game once again. Apologies about that one. We do see the Boom Pistol Bully did get played, or one of them got played by Tomoff on the previous turn, increasing the cost of Varanus and Zephyrus for this one turn alone. But as I mentioned, Hunter, not overly reliant on a consistent flurry of battle cries, so there's always something reasonable to do with Hunter, even if this Boom Pistol's been played.
Yeah, and unless Tomoff can find something to do next turn, does Kane give him lethal, maybe? It would definitely give him something to do. Yeah, then he's just going to explode the turn after. Gives it up, and it goes to 1 apiece.
Yep, it's all going to be even now as Eddie does take a win with his Hunter. And that's the thing, I think, again, 1 game sample size, of course, there on stream, but we clearly have different opinions on the Hunter versus Demon Hunter matchup. And I think now, if you are going to go just a little bit slower, and mainly for me, just having that Warglaves of Azinov not available on 5, if your turn 5 now versus Hunter is a 5/5 and pass, yes, there's the effect of locking out the battle cries, but it's not taunt, it's not rush. There's no kind of battle cry that there's no removal because it's not glaive bound. You're really just giving Hunter like one more turn where you just played a blank 5/5. I have no doubts though that when Demon Hunter's ahead on board and winning, the Boom Pistol probably just locks the game out because of not only its high damage but also the extra effect of its battle cry.
I'm going to admit, I've said this before, and I'm seeing some players coming to the same conclusion, which makes me feel a bit more confident about it. But I think Glavebound's days might be numbered. The nerf to Warglaves has meant that Glavebound sometimes just doesn't have a home even on turn 6. And if it hasn't got a home on turn 6, unless you hero power and attack, that's like usually a pretty awful turn. I don't know. I think that the card might just end up having to be thrown away at some point.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about this in deck creation quite a lot. Like, what are the 29 and 30th cards? And maybe right now those are the Claybound Adepts, and we might see once the expansion hits, when everyone's going to get some new cards to play with, that those are maybe the first ones that go away in the testing of the new archetypes. But we are going to go straight into game number 3 here. Eddie on the top. 1-1 so far versus Tomoff, going to be back on this Control Demon Hunter, whereas Tomoff, I'll confess, I did not see what he locked in, but I think it was Hunter.
I'm not sure either, so I'm going to wait and see what he picks up, but I also thought it was Hunter, which means we're probably both going to be wrong together, if history is anything to be.
Oh, it was Hunter. I recognise Hunter even in just peripheral vision when I'm not even focusing. I just have a feeling sometimes. And a pretty solid opening hand here, or at least a couple of decent opening hand cards here. The Acidic Swampoo's not fantastic to have this early, but also bear in mind that Eddie, he's not playing regular Demon Hunter, right? He's not playing tempo, so he's not going to be being super aggressive on board early on versus Tomoff. So I think just the fact that Tomoff now has this Stormhammer and the Animal Companion means that with the help of that Swampoo's, he has all the right tools to just start applying some pressure in this early game.
Do you think the ability, the not playing of the Swampoo's is because there's Eldrazi Warblades in the deck? Like, if that was a different weapon that was in the deck, would he be less worried about it? Obviously, the lifesteal being a big deal.
I think it's just both, right? I think the Eldrazi Warblades can be a pain, especially for Hunter, because Hunter normally wants to do a lot of damage early and then end the game, and big heals put a big stop to that. But also, just oozing the Warblades of Azimuth, even though it's later in the game, is still very powerful. And as I mentioned, because Eddie isn't going to be pressuring Tomoff down, then Tomoff doesn't have to play a tempo ooze right now. He can just take his time.
When you get this sort of hand as the Hunter, I assume you have to trust your deck a bit. Just play on curve the best you can and assume it's going to sort itself out. Because this is the downside of Highlander Hunter in theory, right? That is, you're going to lose your curve.
It is, but the deck... as opposed to having a really bad opening, it's not drawing your big game-winning cards, right? Not drawing Alex Straza, Bran, Nagrand, Slam, Tiamat. There are games where you past turn 4 or 5, you actually start drawing like 1 and 2 drops, which just lessens the power significantly. I think that is actually more often the case, the bigger problem.
Right, so it's actually designed. I mean, we saw the pickup there of the Battle Mage, which fills in nicely with the Stormhammer. If we're talking pure curves, obviously that's not. There's Hearthstone to be played in the meantime. I don't want to lessen the Hunter too much. But yeah, those 1-drops do help to fill it out. But he hasn't got the Bran at the moment or the Grand Slam, and he may need that the way this Demon Hunter controls things so carefully.
Gavin's just going to be played here to lock in this Zigzor. It's going to be a strong follow-up turn, and I do think that Tomoff will be relatively happy to see not only a swing of the Eldrazi, but also the I-Beam so early in the game, because it's already, that's one I-Beam used that's not going to gain the benefit from a Moag Artificer.
This is a problem, though. It's a big problem at the moment, because next turn the Chaos Nova is there, and Tomoff doesn't have a way to deal with this currently. Verana says, okay, I can deal with it if he picks that up, but at the moment, Eddie's just going to fight back.
I like this approach, though. Just make the most aggressive turn possible. Push damage, because yes, Eddie gets the 12-12 now with the Magtheridon being live, but he can't attack with it, right? And he used his whole turn, so now Tomoff gets like another attack to put in here. And I think we might see him just going maximum board presence, maximum damage. I like it.
This is something I've learned from you over the last 12 months or so. If you're in trouble as Hunter and you're not quite sure what to do, just whack them in the face and it'll all be okay.
Right.
Force them to have to trade.
You play this out in your mind. If Tomoff tries to do anything weird to start trading through this Magtheridon, all that does is help Eddie. There's no world in which that actually works out. I think Tomoff is of the mindset now. He's going to go so aggressive, as you mentioned, he forces Eddie to trade into him, or both players just play a weird game of chicken where they both go face until one dies, and maybe Tomoff gets Brand next turn. Maybe he gets Zephyrus, or some way to slow down this Magtheridon and make the difference. Maybe he doesn't, and then the race is won in a different fashion. But I do think
Eddie's
this is
worked
fair
it out.
from Tomoff.
Eddie has worked it out. He knows at the moment that his opponent couldn't do anything last time, so can't do anything this time. But the Rotnest Drake pickup has just given Tomoff the absolute thing he needed. But Eddie had set up a lethal there with the double Chaos Strike next turn and the Twin Slice. He worked out that Tomoff couldn't deal with it, but Tomoff picked up the answer.
Yeah, Rotnest, honestly, I don't know if it's just me, but the last day and a bit on the stream, just in this tournament, Rotnest has been an absolute terror in these games so far in this tournament. So pretty crazy that once again we see it potentially just pull the win out of the bag here for Tomoff.
Yeah. I like highlighting Eddie's play there, even though he's not going to win, because he could have probably held on by doing trades and stuff, but it looked a bit messy, but he had worked out he's going to get it done. And now he has to go totally the other direction. He can heal for quite a bit here. Maybe buy himself one more turn, but I don't know what he does with that one more turn.
Demons. Demons.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? I'm a little bit quiet just because I'm looking at what the potential things he can do is. He pretty much would need to draw into... I wonder if it's actually better for him to try and go Chaos Strike, and then go Blade Dance.
He can heal for 8 here and just go face, and I don't think he's dead on board if he does that. It's not pretty,
Yeah,
but
based
based on the same theory he did last time, he's actually choosing to heal for 7, so it's 1 off. Of course, where's the 1 coming from? Has Eddie sorted this out? He's got it next turn, right? Oh, it's only a single slice. It's only a single slice.
That's the problem, isn't Eddie also just one off now?
Well, he maximised damage the way he did it by getting his hero power in 2 turns in a row. So he maximised his chances over the 2 turns, which was what he was trying to set up. So now it's Chaos Strike into please give me Twin Slice. Just one time, please. Make it today, if you're an Eddie fan. So we're working out exact things works. If only Twin Slice works, then he's better off playing the Spectral Sight. It's not there. And he's only up to 4, so even if this now hits, he's not going to be able to do 9. But he could heal for enough to get out of it? I don't think so.
Yeah, he did have I-Beam as well, potential draw. I think he had 1 more left. Yeah, a very close game there. I'm just staring at the deck list, which is why I'm randomly looking off camera, just to see what was available for him. And there was a few chances, and I do feel like Eddie really suffered from just not having a Blade Dance in that game. At any given time with the weapon, he could have buffed it up and then Blade Danced these minions away, because Tomoff did a good job of, as soon as he could deal with that Magtheridon, of course, he had a board even before then, and just never really lost it, so it pushed through so much damage over the course of a few turns. If Eddie put down 1 Blade Dance to clear off, say, the Zixor and one of the other minions, then suddenly health with the help of the Eldraki Warblades healing back up the turns after. So really, really close game there, and it probably is going to start feeling frustrating for Eddie, honestly, just being pretty close or having these close games with this controlled Demon Hunter, but just not quite getting there. And now it looks like Tomoff is going to be back on his Demon Hunter to finish up his series for him, hopefully.
Yeah, and this is just a hard deck to beat. It does its thing repeatedly well, that's why it's got a high win rate, and you'd fancy his chances big time, but obviously fancying your chances and actually converting are sometimes 2 different things. I did that last game, honestly. If you're new to Hearthstone, you should just watch it, because you'll see that sort of play only at top level Grandmaster, sorry, top level legend, or in bronze. Like both players just hitting each other in the face and not paying
for two
attention
very
to each
different
other's broad.
reasons.
Yeah. They're actually working out they can afford to go face and not die and so on, rather than just going, hey, health damage good, which is the Raven reason.
Right, well, let's go into this game. Going to be Demon Hunters, but very different on either side here. Tomoff playing this tempo variant, the one we're more used to seeing with a couple of changes. Eddie on this control once again. And, you know, let's remind ourselves, although we have seen this control Demon Hunter suffer a little bit, Eddie is 4-1 in this Swiss. So it has been achieving something in his matches to have this good a score.
Yeah, and Eddie is actually just one of the best players in all Masters Tours. He's won 37 Masters Tours matches already, and this is only, what, the 7th one? So he has gone at a fair old clip, 64%, including winning Bucharest and then throwing the trophy across the room.
He's Eddie's training with TJ now, so
that was so fun.
I expect his next victory that involves a trophy presentation will go with utmost smoothness, as he will never drop a trophy again.
Tomoff just going to go repeated minions, right? And the problem with this in the Demon Hunter mirror is your opponent kills them by taking more damage with their weapons a lot of the time. So they're still doing the damage even when they're getting removed. Two more damage done if you look at it that way.
Yeah, there is just a lot of healing for Eddie available here, especially when this Moag's just sat there. Not only is it strong to just help with the removal, but the second he gets an I-beam, you start to heal for so much. It's pretty crazy.
Even though Tomoff played that turn instantly, I think it's set up nicely for next turn, going to 5 mana, clearing out the left-hand side of his hand, and then going into Skull on turn 6. You say about the Vulpera?
Yeah, he could go for maybe getting an I-beam, because I do feel like he will need the heal pretty soon. As you mentioned, he's going to take some damage by trading into these minions, especially because he does have this Warglaives in his hand for a little bit later too. He does need some level of recovery, whereas Tomoff, let me just triple check. He's running 1 I-beam for some level of healing in his list too.
We might get an interesting game of chicken later with this Chaos Nova. It's only a one-of in Eddie's deck, so Tomoff may choose not to play around it. Oh, and that's why I said it. I wondered if he was just going to do it this turn to get it out of the way, but I didn't think he would, if I'm honest. Now he's going to get frozen, so he's relying on the weapon to do the next round of clearing, and that's not going to happen for him. And with another Shadow Weaver picked up for next turn, using that Chaos Nova could turn out to be a pretty fatal thing to have done.
He does have Immolation Aura and Moag, and now he even has the Moag I-beam too, so he can heal for a lot and not really feel too much under threat. And maybe this is a turn he can use to actually get Metamorphosis live. Oh, he's going to go for it now. Okay.
Yeah, he clearly doesn't mess around. He trusts his deck to keep drawing the removal, so he's happy to keep using it. If you trust your deck, this is where watching the creator of decks is interesting. You trust your deck to keep doing it, and that's fine. I'd be scared I was using too much removal the way he's played it.
Well, now the pickup of Blur means that he can pretty freely Warglaives of Azinov any board down from Tomoff that he wants, and not really take any damage in response, so nice little pickup there. The Blade Dance with the help of Eddie's Moag, going to absolutely obliterate his opponent's board here.
Yeah, just a reminder, there is no Altruist in Tomoff's deck. There's something I always look for when there's double Skull on the left like this. This feels like the key moment in this game. Does Eddie want to just take some more damage and free up his Skull and equip his weapon? Or does he want to continue to just remove things at the rate he's been removing them?
What if he just hero powers and then metamorphs his hero power here? Kill off the 4-3, kill off a 1-1. He has a 1 mana deal 4 next turn. Like, I think that's just a good play, right? He's not going to take much damage. Deals with
definitely
the
the other
threats.
option.
Demons.
I feel like it's the only option, right? He can use the mana just to equip the weapon, but I don't know.
You can also do like Immolation Aura and Meta and just not use the Meta and just take some damage next turn. There's a lot of options. I like yours quite a lot. I think I would equip the weapon and free up the Skull. Let's see which
Well,
one
if he goes
chooses.
Immolation Aura and Meta, he leaves the Shadow Weaver alive, right? So that feels like a bit of a bad choice. I do like this. Oh yeah, of course he can't hit. The hero power does nothing, even though it's like the order lull play of like, you know, the floated mana,
Yeah.
but he was frozen, of course, so he can't kill off a 1/1. Tomoff, though, going to go for that skull and double boom pistol bully. So even though it looks a little bit strange, 2-2-mana 5/5s isn't the worst outcome with a bit of a power play to just put a lot of stats on the board going forward.
Yes, Skull doesn't need to hit some sort of crazy combo to be good. It just needs to be cast, and it's good. It pays for itself and more the next turn most times. So not only do you save the mana, but also you get the swing turn in the process. And it's just interesting to see how Tomoff approaches. Like, does he want to put them both on the board at the same time, basically, is the main question.
Right.
Because of the likes of Blade Dance, etc., he may only want to go one at a time. They can't be shot down now by the meta, of course.
I will say, though,
Poor warlock.
Eddie's starting to piece together a good amount of damage.
Yeah.
Now so is Tomoff.
Well, now Eddie has the Warblades, he's looking good to be able to do a big heal at some point. But he's still sort of a bit of a sitting target. He's not, because he's not fighting back.
Poor warlock.
Tomoff has just been at liberty to keep hitting Eddie and force Eddie to expend resources dealing with it. I know that's how control decks work, but when the aggro deck is drawing cards rapidly and being aggressive and setting up goodness knows how much damage Tomoff's got next turn, it's probably my job to add it up, but I don't want to. There's too much.
Blade Dance is going to be really clean here. Feels so good there, but it's something we don't see a lot because Blade Dance isn't a card we've seen Demon Hunter typically use
This
up
is
until
lethal.
now.
Or is it not? 4, 6, 10, 14. Is it exact lethal or is it one off? My brain's trying to melt.
So he can cast everything, right?
Yeah.
He can hero power, metamorphosis, hero power, still use the Glade Bound and the Twin Slice.
Either way, it's a lot. So it's not lethal. I think it's one off.
Nobody move and no one gets hurt.
So he saves it, obviously.
Nobody move and
So it doesn't
Yeah, I
get
think it would have
hurt.
been one off on a quick count.
It was an even number, and he had to do an odd number, so I'm assuming it's one off. But powerful board and a lot of damage kept back in hand. There's 10 in hand, as well as the 12 on board.
Yeah,
so
Eddie
board
can
is
use,
lethal, hand is lethal.
Eddie can use this blur now to help clear all this and then finish with the Aldraki Warblades to hit for the healing the healing amount on the last swing. And that's absolutely huge because without this blur, I think he just would be dead. And he picked blur quite a while ago in this game now, so it's finally paying off for him in spades.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. He must have planned roughly this when he picked the blur. This was the scenario he had in mind. And yeah, he dealt with the board, got out of range of all this nonsense that's in hand, and somehow is going to continue the game for some time at the very worst.
There's still a ton of damage though.
Yeah, he's used all of his damage, all of his healing up pretty much, and it's still coming at him.
our enemies will fall. Our enemies will fall.
And Tomoff, identifying that Eddie used up so much gas just to do the last turn, goes, okay, well, you're not doing that again. Good luck. If you've got it, fair
Right.
play.
He does have Mohawk Immolation Aura, so that is a lot of damage. The mana burn we can see not, or at least probably not overly important right now.
Something I'm really liking about Eddie's deck is that these Vulpiras feel broken in it. They feel terrible in most builds, and you kind of have to play them. In this deck, they feel amazing.
To get Spectral Vision of the Mystery Choice, going to help him draw a little bit further into the deck.
It's hanging in
doesn't
there.
feel good, does
we
it?
can see. No, it doesn't. But still a lot of health gain. Nutty amount of health gain. Sets up lethal.
Well, it's on this full pair of Scoundrel. That, well, Mystery Choice.
We consider the Soul Cleave? Just to get out of lethal
Oh,
range?
I guess. It puts him at 3. Hero Power's not going to be enough. What is this game? I'm loving it, but it's crazy.
What is this match? Every game has been, I'm going to kill you next turn. And then it's like, no, not quite, you're not, but I'm going to kill you next turn.
Eddie has a lot of draws here with the speed. Did he go Spectral Sight? Spectral Sight. I think that's going to be game. He insta-locked that in, and Eddie fights back. Warglaives of Azimuth, number 2, getting the job done. And honestly, very, very close game. It looked like Tomoff was going to finish it earlier on, but I have to just respect Eddie's choice much earlier on for just getting that blur, which means that he picked it so long ago, but it paid off so much. He got to clear the board and then get that heal for 11, which kept him alive for that turn, which then obviously led to him be able to stay alive in the following turns as well. So a really good game there for Eddie. I'm glad for his sake he got a victory with that Control Demon Hunter on stream, so that's going to be good. But it is all going to come down to this one now. Demon Hunter versus Warlock, Lorinda.
Demon Hunter versus Warlock quite often depends on the Demon Hunter getting like a Cane early on to protect against the Dark Skies. But with a nerf to Cane, I'm feeling that maybe this just switches slightly in the Warlock's favour. And I know what I'm saying there. It feels like the Demon Hunter should just smash the Warlock to pieces, but I don't think it does, honestly.
Well, how do you feel about the 2 Boom Pistol Bullies, though? Because how does that affect Questlock when there's a chance that Tomoff could just go Boom Pistol Bully on curve with the backup of an aggressive opening? Do you think that's enough of a window to push some damage to win the game?
Yeah, I mean, 5 health is the big number. I'm talking about the Cane nerf, but you're right. I forgot about the Bullies in the deck, which also have 5 health and hit you really hard. Obviously, almost everything in the opposing deck does 4, so if they want to kill it, they often have to use up 2 cards. One card in particular being a Soulfire or something, taking a piece of combo kill away, which gives the Demon Hunter even more time. So I must admit, I am happy just to see how it unfolds. But I think the Warlock might just squeak this out.
All right, well, looks like we are getting into it. Eddie on the top on this quest, Warlock, Tomoff on this Demon Hunter once again. I feel like both these players have played Demon Hunter 100 times in this series, even though that's obviously not the case. But having that Umbra Wing opening, still a little bit slow. None of the 1-drops in Tomoff's opening handler in there.
Yeah, it's pretty awkward, although even the Org Merchants do enough damage to be irritating. As it happens, Eddie does have the answers, of course. And actually an interesting problem for him here. I've never seen this.
Well, whether to coin coil?
Or whether to not play Quest on 1 and play it on 2 instead as well. All 3 options.
Oh, but then you miss a draw from coil, right, for the quest, which is pretty huge. That would, I think for me, the question was, can you take 2 damage next turn and just not coil, and just go for the quest, and then maybe tap, and then maybe tap coil the turn after. You do get repeat hits from the 2-1, but still, that's what I was looking at, less so about whether to skip the quest.
Yeah, very interesting turn, because the problem is it's not the 2-1 if you leave it up with the repeat hits, it's you get behind. You're constantly playing catch-up on... You kill the 2-1 next turn, but the minion they played that turn sticks, and they end up sticking abroad because of it. It escalates. Eddie wondering already whether he can afford to tap. And I see people play much quicker with Warlock all the time than this, and I always wonder why. So I'm quite happy to see Eddie playing a little bit slower than most.
Yeah. I do think tapping, although it feels bad when now there's quite the aggressive front here from Tomoff, I think tapping is how the deck is made to be played, right? I think avoiding tapping because you're going to take some damage is a lot of the time makes you lose the game here. So I do appreciate Eddie going for it. He does have some options. He still has this Moag Nether Breath turn if he really wants it, which is going to heal him up. But maybe he can afford to do something else. Moag Rain of Fire clears off all the board apart from the Bone Chewer Brawler, and maybe for now that's just enough.
The Bone Chewer gets bigger though. That's the scary part when you do that. Not a lot bigger, obviously, but there's also Nether Breath Double Rain, but that's a lot of resources. It's not so much the resources, but the number of cards specifically being the problem.
Right.
So if you use your plot twist.
Yeah, I think for now, though, he's not planning on plot twisting in the near future anyway, right? Because next turn is not certainly by any means, but looking to be a potential Netherwing turn. And then the turn after is probably going to be Kartut as well. So it might be turn 7, 8, or even 9 before we even see Eddie even consider this plot twist for now.
And I hate that Eddie plays Kartut because that now means I have to re-evaluate my life choices. So I'm not a fan of the card, but if Eddie plays it, it'll be worth it.
Oh, pretty solid pickup here from Tomoff.
Nobody move!
Oh, interesting though that he did go for that boom pistol. I would have thought that although it looks very slow to play the skull, I don't think this boom pistol's particularly setting up lethal against the Warlock with like 7 cards in hand, right? So, I mean, we could see the cards up, but even so, I think it was more likely to just get value from this skull quickly.
And the BM, you don't BM Eddie, he's lovely.
Well, there's also that weird feeling where Tomoff BMs the Kartut defender with an emote and then just rips the Mayev off the top. Unless the emote was for the Mayev and it was just a bit delayed for us, I'm not sure.
Eddie clearing up once again.
Yeah, the only problem there with Tomoff, or at least what I'm wondering is, when and how does this skull get played, if at all? Because if he was planning on that push being game-winning, one, he planned that without the Mayev, and also, to get this skull active, he kind of has to play the Adept most of the time, unless he draws a 2-drop. So, I don't know, I think I would have liked to see Tomoff there maybe go for the skull, take one slow turn to have a much more impactful next few turns.
Yeah, it was a very long-term strategy decision. He had to, parting of the ways, did he want to keep steady, constant, irritating pressure, or did he want to try and have one big turn? And I feel that the presence of Twisting Nether in Eddie's deck might have led Tomoff to want to have more steady pressure, as opposed to playing against Control Warrior, where you don't want to have steady pressure.
Eddie not having a Dragon Activator for this Netherwing is a little bit frustrating for him, no doubt. Mortal Coil is going to mean he goes for it, but with 12 cards left, him having Zephyrus active is huge. He can do the job with this. He could just trade the 2-3 into the Berserker, and then Zephyrus will, I'm going to say, almost certainly offers him a Holy Nova.
Yep, I agree with that. We just need to mention that Inner Demon was picked up while we were chatting as well. Because that's just surprise value. Eddie's very good at calculating what to play around. And an Inner Demon may just mess him up later on.
Almost out of time.
Yeah, it's a lot of additional burst damage. It is a lot of mana, though, as well. So a lot of the time, that Inner Demon is just looking at potentially 9 damage for a turn. Which, don't get me wrong, can easily be enough to win the game. Yeah, there is the
BM,
Nova.
Yeah. That wasn't BM, that was just complaining. Tomoff doesn't hold back when he's unhappy either, I'll let you know.
Well, suddenly Eddie is on 21 in relatively, I'll say, safe health total, and that's just enough with the Arunasi Brood Mother off the top. Eddie takes the victory in an extremely close series, but I do have to sit there and think with the way Tomoff appeared to be reacting, and even that concede there. Whether that's, you could argue the concede is right or wrong, I do feel that maybe he just lost his cool a little bit in that game, and I think he maybe should have considered things a little bit more, maybe gone for the skull a bit earlier as well. There were options. It's not like the game was just a straight 1-2-3, paint by numbers style game. I think there were points there for both players, honestly, to make some improvements in the play. But I do feel that clearly it looked like Tomoff seemed a little bit frustrated and maybe let that get to him a little bit too much, in my opinion.
I mean, Tomoff has been around for a long time. He top 16 to DreamHack way back when, and was playing like Open Cups even before that. But that game 4, and he hasn't played much competitive until this year. That game 4, for someone who's not playing a huge amount of competitive recently, is a real body blow, and maybe that just threw him off a little bit.
Maybe it did, but it does mean that Eddie is going to take the victory. And again, if you're just tuning in, or I'll mention it later on anyway, but it was a pretty cracking series to watch, right? There was a lot of close moments, players really just going for it on both sides, almost setting up lethals, almost escaping lethals, should I say, almost throughout every single game. So pretty cool overall. But that was just one match from this round. We've got plenty more coming up. We're going to go to a quick break while we set those up. So don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back with some more Hearthstone.
Welcome everybody to Masters Tour Asia Pacific Online. We're here with some of the other matches from around the tavern in round 6. Really getting into things now in day 2. And what a way to kick things off with that fantastic series that we had between Tomoff and Eddie. It was a lot of different lines I think that could have been taken to maybe change the outcome there.
Yeah, it was a really interesting series to watch. I think, Eddie's build of Demon Hunter, the Control Demon Hunter, or whatever else you want to call it, does lead to those kind of weird-looking games because it's why I hesitate to call it a control deck. It's just weird. It's an early game control deck, but then late game you do get those scenarios where where you just try and race. You just stack up damage. You use the burst healing that you're getting from your Warblades to just be able to offset and set up race situations. So yeah, I think that led to a very interesting situation in the series, and then a little bit of tilt, I think, creeping in at the end for Tomoff as he had the series stolen away from him.
Yeah, but now moving on to some of the other. As I was saying, we can jump into Game 3 here of Mint versus Peace Hawk. Interesting to see Peace Hawk flying under the USA flag there. I looked him up on Twitter. I believe he is also a Peruvian player as well. I don't know if he has dual nationality. But he's playing a very aggressive lineup is one thing I can say about him for sure. He's got the Totem Shaman, he's got the Murloc Paladin thrown in there as well, which, while it was a big surprise factor, not a lot of players were expecting to go for the full aggro version. It's been working very well. In no small part, I think, due to the complete lack of Priest that we've seen knocking about, which generally has a very nice matchup against all of the aggressive decks, due to their early game dominance and high amount of removal. Mint on the other side, as I keep saying about all the Japanese players, I feel like even regardless of what I see from their play, they're often a very, very good standing right out of the gate, because if they are in any way connected to the kind of main practice group that we're seeing out of Japan with their 3 GM, in Possessi, Glory, and Alutemu, then they are already off to a fantastic start. And as we can see here, he's already going with the kind of Japanese special of the Spell Druid here that has been very, very popular in Asia Pacific. And good reason. The Japanese players have bought it time and again, and it clearly worked very well for them with all 3 getting through to the semi-finals.
Yeah, not only did they have kind of superior performances with it, but they were also the ones innovating the builds of the deck. I think they were some of the first players that we saw trimming it down, getting the more streamlined version, dropping the Kael'thas from the deck as well, ending up with this Sarah Unleashed build that we kind of take as commonplace now. So definitely thanks to Japan for where we've ended up with Druid, and this, if that's something that you do want to praise them for, I guess, depending on your opinions on the deck.
But now for Peace Hawk here. He's got the kind of start that you're actually looking to hit here, I think, in the Hunter versus Druid. It's super aggressive and even has the perfect follow-up of Evasive Feywing, which I was talking to you about, I think, earlier, of how I generally see it as too slow, but it is the perfect complement here to this game plan from Peace Hawk.
It is for sure, and I think it is a pretty effective card when you do curve out as well as Peace Hawk has here. It's a great card to follow up aggression that you build like this. The problem is that it's very, very slow, as you say, when you don't get the perfect curve and your opponent is perhaps able to seize board control before your turn 4.
What to do?
Cobalt Spelkin here, kind of an interesting card. We're seeing it pop up more and more in obviously Demon Hunter. It's fairly common in Rogue, getting it off the lackeys. But here, just using it to get a couple of extra cheap spells for Mount Seller if you want to take a slightly slower approach. Doesn't seem bad to me at all. And obviously this is a slightly different conundrum now for Peace Hawk, with the extra 2 damage from Scale Rider being very nice to preserve that little bit of extra board control here in the face of this incredibly impressive Taunt minion. But in the end, he just decides the 5-4 untargetable is so insane, I've got to get it down on the board, even though this does eat up the last remaining dragon in hand. So this Scale Rider, for the moment at least, looking a lot weaker.
It does, yeah. It's obviously good when you're expecting Mount Seller to come down. Obviously, getting the big untargetable minion in play is something that you're interested in, so that they don't have clean Bog Beam targets. But there is still a Bog Beam target on the board in the Dwarven Sharpshooter. And of course, they can have pretty effective Mount Seller turns even without the Bog Beam available. But yeah, the Emerald Explorer has just done insane work, and I think people don't give that card enough credit just for the stats of the Taunt minion when it comes down. Because Druid can ramp, they're not generally not on turn 6 when they're playing it. It can just be an oppressive force even without the extra Discovered Dragon.
The benefit here for Minty of hitting both of the early ramp cards is that generally when this happens, you have the time to play Overflow. You're not going to die anytime soon, and now the follow-up is rapidly becoming absolutely absurd. Even with this incredibly powerful start that the Dragon build of Hunter does afford you more consistently over the Highlander build, I am hesitant to say that it'll be enough.
Yeah, and I am slightly concerned about the way that Peace Hawk has played out the curve. As we were talking about that, playing the untargetable, it did have its upsides, but as you correctly pointed out, it really did break up his curve and limit his options in the long term. Now, the Mount Seller turn is going to come out, though, from Mint, and it's going to be a pretty impressive-looking one, honestly, although the beasts are not being particularly kind just yet. Interesting to see where this Ironbark goes. He might choose to use the Ironbark to protect the Mount Seller as opposed to just making it a giant minion here. Try and protect it from any potential Varanus clears coming through, but I think no matter what he does, he's going to be vulnerable to the Varanus, but just staving off the stats on board by taunting a different minion might feel appealing as well.
Yeah, it's not just the Varanus as well. Just kind of any approach with damage coming in as the second hair. Definitely not what you're looking for here.
Someone needs a bog strat clacker right now. That's what Mint needs.
Well, Peace Hawk can think of, are there any 3-mana dragons that could turn this around for me? It's approaching the territory, I think, where you need to start considering, all right, if I get Brightwing, and Brightwing offers me the perfect legendary here to play on turn 7, because he's just losing board and he's not going to get it back.
Yeah, I can't really see what the out is, but to be perfectly honest, I don't really see what 2 damage from Scale Rider does here in this situation either, so maybe this is the just correct order in this position.
I mean, he still gets the dragon, right? So he can still do the
That's
Scale
true.
Rider.
Yeah,
it is
yeah,
just correct.
Yeah, you're right.
So you weren't wrong. Sorry for throwing you under the bus.
Yeah, not wrong, just stupid.
Yeah, that's probably just the best one. Twin Tyrant just that little bit too slow here. But if you're not killing this, you're just going to be dying very quickly.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Derek, but when I've given my Druid opponent 2 full turns of Mount Seller, I have not ended up winning too many of those games.
Me neither. And I think this does speak to me how I feel about Dragon Hunter, because I don't know about you over in the European region of Grandmasters, but we saw this deck once in APAC where Tyler brought it because HS Replay said it was good. He had not played a single game of it, and it almost lost him both series that he played it with. Have you seen it at all over in Europe? And if so, how has it been performing?
I'm not sure we did, no. I'm gonna stick my neck out and say no. It's possible we did and forgot about it, but no, I kind of share your stance on it. I don't really see its benefits over the Highlander Hunter, so yeah, I think it's a pretty strange choice for me. And I think that is reflected in the tournament lineup as a whole. Hunter is overwhelmingly the most brought class, and of those Hunters, Highlander Hunter is the overwhelmingly brought archetype as well.
Yeah. Because of course.
Because why not? Exactly.
Yeah, I think if we think back to the history of Dragon Hunter, for me, the only reason it really existed in the first place, because it was never like an overwhelmingly dominant deck, it was just kind of a fun version that people had found, and it was when Mage was very, very popular at the kind of just after the peak of Highlander Mage, and it was an incredibly dominant matchup. Mage basically never won it, and you just took that incredibly dominant one matchup because you'd face it quite a lot on ladder, whereas in tournament play, especially when Mage is a very unpopular archetype, maybe there's a couple of other decks I'm not seeing that it does well against. It probably has a better chance against Rogue because the higher damage. Maybe you can just smoke down Warrior, although I find that doubtful. But even with these crazy outcomes going face, I still don't see it going the way of the Hunter here.
I mean, Rexar clearly has a plan. It's a plan that was probably the only hope that Peace Hawk had in that situation. But yeah, the Savage Roar is going to make a real mess of that situation as far as Peace Hawk is concerned, and Mint is going to go up to a 2-1 lead. And honestly, we have been seeing Hunter perform extremely well, at least from what we've been seeing on stream. It is a little bit behind the top couple of classes at the end of the day last night with Rogue and Demon Hunter and possibly one other putting up superior win rates. But it does certainly seem like Hunter has backed up its bring rate overall with a consistent win rate as well. But as mentioned, that is overwhelmingly the Highlander Hunter that we're talking about. And I am still yet to be convinced about the Dragon Hunter build, which I guess the only argument I'd listen to is if he sat me down and said, hey, you know that Rot Nest Drake card? Don't you want to play 2 of those? I might just be able to get swayed by that argument.
Yeah, that's the only thing that really sways me as well, is just how insanely powerful Rot Nest Drake is. And maybe Stormhammer, but even that has shown that 2 of them can be a little bit clunky.
Yeah.
There was kind of something a little bit interesting I will quickly touch on there that we could see in the screen where we could see the bans, was that Paladin has been banned away from Peace Hawk, which either tells you how bad the rest of his decks are, or just how good Paladin is against specifically Mint's lineup, because that's got to be one of the few Paladin bans in the entire tournament, right?
I would suspect so, yeah. And honestly, I think it makes sense. Mint will be expecting his Warrior to get banned, which is probably his best matchup against the Paladin. I do think the Paladin beats the Druid. I also think the Paladin beats the Highlander Hunter, which Mint also has as well. And then new builds of Demon Hunter versus Paladin, not so sure. Tend to still lean towards the Demon Hunter because of the efficiency of the hero power. That's never going to change, but not something I could give you any hard data or even anecdotal data on. But certainly 2 out of the 3 matchups that Mint would have felt that he was being left with are extremely weak to that Paladin. So as weird as it sounds, it's a ban that does seem to make sense to me.
Does indeed seem to make sense. But one of the other decks I think that functions in a similar way to the Paladin is actually the Zoo here. I saw a couple of times, I think it was Surrender in APAC GM, who was going for a... Oh, no, sorry, I apologize. It was Blitzchung who's going through the reasoning here. The Zoo feels very, very strong against all the Highlander decks. Highlander Hunter in particular. This was before the Scrap Imp nerf, of course. But it basically just means that they are able to get on the board so consistently, dominate early on, and even though they're damaging themselves a whole bunch, Hunter is just not able to get the damage in quickly enough before they die. But even having said all of that, in this starting hand, Peace Hawk gets Scrap Imp on 2, the absolute dream, and simply forgoes it.
And then does not play it. Yeah, I mean, I can get into his head, I suppose. He has a huge tempo play immediately with the Evil Genius, and he doesn't have a way to cash out that Skull of Gul'dan in the window where Scrap Imp will be dormant to really maximize his hand potential. But he did still have the follow-up of that Evil Genius if he could have used it after the Scrap Imp and then end up buffing up some lackeys in his hand as well. So yeah, I have to admit, pretty surprised to see Peace Hawk being blessed by the Hearthstone gods with Scrap Imp opening hand and then turning it down. Not something we've really seen a great deal of.
Yeah. Titanic Lackey making some amount of sense to me here. The only punish that you're really looking at is Kill Command as the way to deal the 4 damage that would be necessary to take out the snake. But I guess then you could look at taunting up the 2/2 then instead, as that still makes the numbers quite difficult in terms of cleanly taking out the Serpent.
Sure. Could also just rush for a value trade. Is that better than taunting in that scenario? Dictate the trades on your terms instead?
I mean, I feel like you're weaker to quite a few more things there, like Stormhammer, Desert Spear, able to cleanly take out the Serpent. Whereas the way that the specific numbers work out, it feels to me like it really is only Kill Command that cleanly deals with this on your opponent's turn. And Zephyrus, of course, but Zephyrus always does it.
Yeah, it almost reaches the point where when you're discussing options, you just don't mention Zephyrus because it's just always there, right? Yeah, you can see if the value trade had been taken, Scale Rider was another card that you didn't even mention that would be able to punish that situation with the 3/2 on the board. So yeah, totally behind this decision to go for the Taunt Plate instead, consolidating his biggest minion on board. And now Peace Hawk is in business with this Scrap Imp.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because this whole game, we're living in the legacy of not playing Scrap Imp on 2, which I think many players would have gone for, just because you're conditioned into seeing how good it is. But he's kind of getting the backup plan that you can do with Scrap Imp, which is still very powerful, of just mid-game Scrap Imp. As long as he doesn't fall behind, which is what his play guaranteed he would not do, he can still get a huge buff turn 5 or 6.
Yeah, And maybe he's looking at his hand. He wasn't seeing a magic carpet at the time, so he chose to go tempo first, and now he's falling back on the Scrap Imp after establishing tempo, because you do fall behind from playing Scrap Imp in the early game. It does happen. It's just then the power of your stats quite often catch you up. But when you're playing against another aggressive deck, you quite often need that magic carpet to support your buffed up 1-drops to really make sure that you're able to swing back into the game, especially now that the power level of just the raw stats from Scrap Imp have been reduced. And actually, Peacehawk is continuing to forego this Scrap Imp and absolutely just playing good old-fashioned Zoo, maximum tempo every single turn.
It's crazy, isn't it? Because, I mean, I was going to say next turn it looks like he's gearing up for Nightshade Matron by sacking in the hand of Gul'dan. I guess that's not necessarily a correct assumption to make, because he's also setting up a very powerful Evil Recruiter plus Scrap Imp, which then curves pretty beautifully into Nightshade Matron the turn after, and then turn 7 already you can start planning out your game plan. That's when the buff becomes live. You'll have a hand full of minions, and you should be able to start dominating it at that point. Very interesting way of playing it.
It does, yeah. It looks out. It's going to work out pretty well. Like, I think, after I talked about it, reasoned it out, I was kind of on board with the first turn, turn 2, skipping the Scrap Imp there. I think that did make sense. This one I find a little bit more surprising, but then again, as you break it down, I do perhaps think there is some merit to it from Peacehawk. But yeah, certainly a very interesting way to approach the deck and the matchup.
Problem is, though, of course, that against Highlander Hunter, as you start extending things into the late game, playing a little bit greedy, as Peacehawk seems to be going for here, you do start walking into their powerhouse plays. As I keep mentioning, Zixor Prime already in hand is not necessarily something you play around, but it's something to consider, especially as they have ways to specifically draw it out of the deck. Zephyrus as well can buy them that extra time. Dino Tamer Brand, Siamat, Dragon Queen to a lesser extent, but still very powerful. Peacehawk needs to be closing out the game fairly soon, I think. He can't just be going super greed mode.
I agree. And on that note, Peacehawk has to be far enough ahead on board now for this to be the Scrap Imp turn, right? Double trade through, eat your remaining lackey, push a bunch of damage getting buffed up from the Fiendish Servant, and then play the Scrap Imp with your remaining 2. Seems pretty clean to me.
Yeah, he's just considering what order he should do this in, and I'm pretty sure sacking the Fiendish Servant first is wrong, because if it buffs either of the lackeys, you would have to sacrifice the other one in, which means you're eating a bigger attack lackey. I think this was correct to give him the highest chance of buffing something that wasn't a lackey.
Yes, sorry. It took me a moment to process what you're saying then, but yeah, you're absolutely right.
It's always a good sign when the person whose job it is to understand Hearthstone can't understand your point as well.
I don't know. Probably says more about me than it does about you, Dan. You're doing great. Believe in yourself.
Thanks, buddy. So we're looking at a guaranteed Diving Griffin here, which is still very underwhelming, to be perfectly honest, on this board. You need the bigger tempo swings to be turning this around. But given that he's, of course, a turn away from Zephyrus into Shadow Word Ruin as the first big board clear that you're offered off of Zephyrus,
yeah,
I guess it makes sense. It's just the best way to buy time.
And it is going to buy a significant amount of time here, considering depending on what Peacehawk does with his remaining 2 mana. Ooh, Camera Thed. And I have rarely said this, looks pretty much perfect here.
Oh, I've just got 5,000 notifications from Raven on Discord, all of which saying, I told you so. Wow.
No. He doesn't like the card in Zoo. He likes the card in Quest Warlock.
Oh, right. Sorry.
That's
I
how
forgot.
wrong he is. You can't even imagine how wrong he is about this card.
My mistake for applying some amount of sense to his reasoning there.
Yeah.
In real-life Hearthstone world, though, I'm definitely looking at double Sinister Deal making sense, just because I mean, I know it's a little bit greedy, but it does just give you the maximum amount of minions that you're buffing, right? I suppose you could go 1 Sinister Deal and then play the lackey, but he's just so far in the lead. He doesn't need to. The amount of tempo he's gaining is absolutely insane.
Yep, absolutely agree. And yeah, just to clarify, when I'm talking about Camerathad being perfect there, it's for what it does once this Scrap Imp buff goes off on the following turn, as opposed to just jamming it down there, even though it was a lot of immediate tempo. It's a similar effect to kind of that magic carpet effect that I was talking about earlier, right? It just guarantees that you can cash out your stats incredibly efficiently by discounting some of your hand.
Wow, Mint is taking the high damage route here. He's going to be tanking a lot with this line of play by not going Zephyrus into Shadow Word Ruin to clear off both of the minions. But I guess his thinking is, the development he throws down on the next turn is so severe, he has to hit Zephyrus into Brawl or some kind of board clear just to have any chance of winning.
Yeah, and I think it's a good spot, honestly. I think, using Zeph to try and react immediately there might have been tempting to some players, but the refill always comes. Your Zeph is nowhere near good enough to pull you ahead of the game, so you need the bigger AoE on the following turn. But honestly, I can extend that argument one turn further. I don't think the Zephyrus into Brawl does enough to get you back into the game on the following turn anyway, so maybe it's all on a hiding to nothing.
Scrap Imp giving +2/+1 really is the uncanny valley of Hearthstone. It just looks wrong. It's so close to being right, but like a 4/2 Orc Merchant, ugh. I hate it.
Almost out of time.
Worth reminding myself here, as I was about to suggest, that Canrathad Double Voidwalker does not apply Rush because they are 0 drops at that point, not 1 drops. I've made that mistake a staggering amount of times.
I was happy with the confession, I've made that mistake before, because I think most people who've learned how to play the Camerathad build of the deck have made that mistake. You probably shouldn't be making it more than once or twice, though.
Yeah, you shouldn't be, and yet here I am, loud and proud. I'm a dum-dum.
Yeah. Ah, yes, Earth Elemental. Exactly what we wanted.
I mean, I think it's a decent third option from Zephyrus. They can't all be winners. You've got a couple of clear, good choices.
I mean, doesn't Earth Elemental leave him dead on board? Yes. There has to be a third card that doesn't leave you dead on board in that situation.
Sure.
Maybe there is. I don't know.
But yeah, Frost Nova in all seriousness. You can't go for a cheesy lethal plan here. You're just too far off, so Brawl is the best you got. And then just pray that Zixor can pull it back on the following turn.
Probably take the lethal outs this turn, right, with the Evil Genius. First things first, you just need 1 extra damage from 2 more lackeys here. And that'll do it.
Very nicely done. The Zoo doing what it does best here. I think, honestly, Zoo, despite being nerfed pretty heavily with the nerf to Scrap Imp a few weeks ago, was just a pretty good bring to this tournament. If you're going for the strategy of banning away Warrior, which Peacehawk has done, which is going to prey very heavily on the Zoo, there's a lot of Highlander Hunter, which I think is a pretty fantastic matchup for the Zoo. Druid, I think, is a very winnable matchup for the Zoo as well. It's a not a powerful deck in terms of its raw power level overall, but I think well suited to the metagame.
Yeah, I do think I would caveat that by saying make sure you're bringing the right build as well, because from what I've seen from the other version, the version that Jing and a few other players have played on stream yesterday, with all the self-damage effects, and Sea Giants and all of the other stuff, it really feels like that deck only works if you draw your entire deck in one very specific order. And outside of that, it just doesn't work at all. That deck has looked pretty miserable to me up until this point, whereas the Gallon plus France build of Zoo that we saw throughout GM is looking a little bit more effective.
All comes down now to the two schools of thought here, the more conventional and the evil genius rogue scientists here, with Peacehawk going for the Dragon Hunter as opposed to the Highlander Hunter from Mint. I'd have to imagine that it probably, at first glance, would lean slightly in favor of the Dragon Hunter due to their more consistent early game.
Yep.
But of course, any ability to go into the late game would swing things back in Mint's favor.
Yeah, and you can see just how important this is already. Just twice the chance to be hitting that Fairy Dragon in the early game, which is now going to terrorize this board state. The perfect response coined out in response to the Dwarven Sharpshooter. And now Mint just had to take the turn off with the Scavenger's Ingenuity, and it does at least allow him to climb back a little bit with this Zixor, but Peacehawk has answers lined up. Can just remove this, keep up tempo with the Blazing Battle Mage. It's in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, answers are plenty. And this is, I think, to be fair, what you would expect in this matchup. You're more likely to win the early game, but you also have a higher onus to win the early game with the Hunter. If this starts to fall apart, or if he doesn't pull significantly into the lead, then I think things could start to go wrong for Peacehawk. But just looking at the curve, I anticipate that it's going to work out pretty well for him. 50-50 to be in an insanely good spot right here.
Wow, the one time it doesn't go face. This card just knows. It goes face every time because that's where you want it to go, but it knows there are specific situations as a Hunter player where a trade is necessary. Felmor's just a good boy.
He's in prison for 2 turns. He's got time to study up.
That's true, yeah.
Survey the territory and then strike. But even here, the follow-up is insane as well. This Rotnest Drake, brilliant. Clears the board, more development, more damage to the face.
Okay.
Would
was
you
gonna
really
ask the
consider not
question.
playing it?
I was going to ask the question just as a topic
Okay.
of conversation, Derek, but Peacehawk cut me off at the pass by just slamming it immediately. But yeah, of course. It's Rotnest Drake. It's 5. You're basically threatening lethal by playing it here. It's almost certainly the play.
Yeah. It's. I think that was one of the big things for me with realizing specifically about playing Rotnest Drake in Hunter, is that it is just, oh my god. It is an overstatted minion, or I suppose you could say just a well-statted minion for 5 mana.
Yes.
Even if you're just getting minimal benefit, it's still the best thing you can do on the turn. So
It's massively overstatted for a battle cry, if you want to put it that way.
Fair, yeah. The one saving grace, however, for Mint is found in Zephyrus. Maybe if he can get... Well, maybe if he was taking a little bit less damage, he could turn it around. But to heal up and clear the board here all in one turn, it's not happening.
Wow.
Maybe
Brawl?
this time you want me. Shut up,
Yeah, I mean,
Ellie.
this time I do actually take a little bit more issue with it, because clearly Brawl was an option there where you can win the Brawl with Zephyrus, and Earth Elemental, once again, you were dead on board, and I think winner Brawl is probably your only chance of even having a slight hope in that situation. But of course, Zephyrus isn't actually a Hearthstone player, he doesn't understand intricacies like that. It's just an algorithm, you just have to learn how it works.
That's right, which means we do see Peacehawk with his very aggressive strategy taking another win here. Up to 5-1 at the end of round 6 is a very impressive result indeed. And I think, as I said, it's not a lineup that is the highest power level overall, without a doubt, when you're facing down the likes of the more standard Druid, Warrior, Demon Hunter, whatever. But it is very well suited, I think, to target some of the more standard decks, like the Hunter in particular, that just, if it doesn't win the board in the early game, as we saw, really struggles to pull things back.
Yeah, I think this kind of aggro lineup is the rock to the scissors that are cutting the priest paper, right? Like the
Yes.
people have brought these anti-priest lineups, which generally consist of sort of big, chunky, mid-range decks or heavy combo decks to be able to deal with priest in that direction. And both of those things are extremely weak to just hyper aggro, hyper early game, which is the kind of lineup that we're seeing from these Shaman Zoo Paladin players. So that seems like the circle of the meta that we have in this tournament right now. And it does seem like some of the aggro lineups are big perform very, very well. And you can see which of the players are performing very well here. And Paveling Book continues to be up at 6-0. One of my favorite stories in Hearthstone in terms of the origin of him as a player, which we might get into later if he is shown on stream. But any other names standing out for you there, Derek?
Well, I think you've got a very strong argument for the best player in Europe in Bunny Hopper up at 6-0. And I think a lot of people would make the argument for the best player in Asia Pacific up at 6-0 as well in Alu Temu. He has consistently been one of the best performing in APAC GM. And I really, really hope that he's able to show what he's got in the Masters Tour as well. But Old Boy as well, up at 6-0. It's worth mentioning as well, in first seed. He's a player that we haven't seen for quite a while at the top level of competitive Hearthstone. But if nothing else, just a really lovely guy. Very, very fun to hang out with. And I think showing that he's still got, after all this time, what it takes to fight at the top of competitive Hearthstone.
Yes, and also recipient of the greatest crowd sign ever seen in Hearthstone, which is I am sold boy on old boy. Which what on earth is that for a pun? I think it was Dr. J that came up with that one. But yeah, also one final shout out to Blythe, who is still up there as well. I almost don't want to talk about it too much because I don't want to jinx it because I want it to happen so much. Like it actually hurts a little how much I'd love to see him make top 8 and potentially win the tournament again. But it's just absolutely staggering what this man is doing to Masters Tours right now. And if he continues through and makes another top 8, I don't think there'll be any even argument in between him and Dead Draw as to who has the greatest success if he's at least able to pick up another top 8 here in this Masters Tour.
I'm telling you, he must just see the Hearthstone game board as a bunch of green ones and zeros. Like he is in the Matrix right now, fully understanding how it works. And I think it would be an incredible story if he can get all the way to another one. But plenty of great players up at the top. Plenty of players also at the 5-1, 4-2 record, maybe hoping to get up to that final spot to get through to the top 8. So without any further ado, we are going to head over to a quick break. But when we come back, we are going to be jumping into round 7. Only 9 rounds of Swiss altogether. So we're really getting down to it now. Make sure you don't miss anything. We'll be back with more Masters Tour Asia Pacific Online after this.